Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
What's up, guys? How are y'all doing? I'm your host, Darren. Welcome to the show. Let's try to make this intro different than my other intros to the hundreds of episodes we have here at Touch MBA. Why don't I share something random that I did this week? I went to Zion National Park and Bryce Canyon National Park with my parents last week, and it was incredible. Those national parks are in Utah. Such a beautiful state and such beautiful national parks. I want to give a shout out to any of our listeners who live in Utah. It's the first time I ever visited your state, and I was super impressed. I loved it. And I can't wait to go back and drag some more friends and family there. So that's a random update and a random introduction from me to mix things up. But I hope you guys are doing well out there. I can't believe it's the 121st episode we're recording here at Touch MBA. And to kind of celebrate this milestone, I thought, well, it's episode 121. Let's do 21 application questions answered. So about a month ago, I was in Ho Chi Minh for a multi-school admissions event that had admissions officers from Berkeley Haas, Cornell Johnson, Virginia Darden, Duke Fuqua, NYU Stern, Michigan Ross, and Yale School of Management. They were all there sitting on a panel at a nice hotel and answering applicant questions from Vietnam. And of course, I had to go and see what they had to say. So I thought I would summarize that presentation because they answered 21 questions there. And I thought some of you might benefit from the knowledge they shared. I think a lot of the topics that will be covered in this week's episode have already been covered on the podcast, but there was also a lot of new information and a lot of new tips that I found quite interesting and I wanted to share with you. So this will be a rapid fire podcast. We'll get through 21 questions really quick. I'll also add a little bit of commentary if I felt anything in particular needs a highlighting. Oh, just one disclaimer that these are my notes, and I used to be able to take really good notes in high school. I was a good student in high school. I took good notes in college, but that was a long time ago. Basically, I just don't want to misrepresent anything these schools said. So just take it as my own summary of the meeting from these top schools, all right? I'm also excited to have a new sponsor on the show. That's IESE Business School. And I've had a handful of listeners who actually ended up going to IESE and had a great experience there. And they thanked me because they were both actually Americans and wouldn't have considered this school. Actually didn't know about the school until they heard about it on the podcast. So let me give a shout out to our sponsor who helps keep this show running. The IESE MBA in Barcelona is consistently ranked top 15 worldwide by the Financial Times. Do you want to challenge yourself and take your career to the next level? IESE's full-time MBA program will transform your capacity to think strategically, explore new perspectives, and be a leader in today's global world. The IESE MBA. Give us 19 months and we give you a lifetime of impact. Get informal feedback on your profile at mba.iese.edu or visit us on campus at our open days. So yeah, shout out to IESE. Thanks for sponsoring the show. And also just a reminder of some free services we offer at touchmba.com. You can get free school selection help. You can get monthly emails of all the top 50 schools recruiting in your neck of the woods. And we also have an ambassadors forum where you can ask real students and recent alumni from top business schools what their experience was really like. And you can find all that at touchmba.com. All right, so let me pull out my notes and let's get to this week's episode. 21 application questions answered. So again, these top 7 U.S. business schools came to Ho Chi Minh for this multi-school admissions event. They first started with the panel addressing 10 commonly asked questions, and then they opened it up to the audience for some Q&A. So I'm going to share their answers and their responses with you and kind of add my own interpretation of some of their answers. So here we go. The first question was, the GMAT or the GRE, does it matter which test applicants take? And Darden answered, it doesn't matter, that it's okay to take the test 3 to 4 times. And everyone nodded their head in agreement. So I think that schools are just looking for the best applicants. And whether it's the GRE or GMAT, you want to perform the best you can. It seemed like 3 to 4 times seems to be the right amount for these schools. So take the test until you get your best score. All right, let's move on to question number 2. How do schools evaluate undergrad transcripts? Duke said that they look specifically at performance on quantitative courses and grade trends. So you want to explain to the admissions committee anything that might be questioned in terms of your performance in quantitative courses and the trends in your undergraduate performance. Haas also mentioned that international applicants don't need to convert their GPAs to US GPA scores, which I actually found interesting. I think that, yes, in your transcripts, you don't need to convert your score to the US GPA, but I think that for many schools, you can make it easier for them by doing so, at least in the pre-application phase. Okay, but I guess on the official application, Haas does not need international applicants to convert scores to US GPAs. Question number 3, should only business students apply? And the answer is no. The caveat is that, as Yale mentioned, schools are looking for evidence of quant skills. And of course, they can find these through your test scores, your transcript, any online or offline courses you've taken. But yeah, they're looking for students from all backgrounds to add to the diversity of the class. Michigan Ross mentioned that applicants should reach out to students on their student ambassador page from non-traditional backgrounds and ask them about their experience. And Cornell mentioned that they really want applicants to succeed. So it's more important to be self-aware if you're lacking, in terms of quantitative background, that you would take it upon yourself to give admissions more evidence that you could get through a rigorous graduate business level course. So no, not only business students should apply. They're looking for students from all backgrounds. Question number 4, what does the ideal resume look like? Okay, Ross said that it's actually the first thing that this admissions officer looks at. Ross also mentioned to keep your resume at 1 page and show the impact you've made at organizations. Make sure you qualify organizations that the admissions officer might be unfamiliar with, and include extracurriculars that show passions. Darden mentioned to highlight job accomplishments, not just roles, and to show progression, show managerial responsibility if you can, and you can do this by mentioning projects and budgets that you helped to manage, even if you weren't a manager. Darden is also looking for international experience, and they use the resume as a framework to understand candidates' background. Haas mentioned to be very aware of industry jargon. Many admissions readers might not come from your industry. So if you have a lot of this acronyms and jargon that they might not understand, be sure to clarify those. And Cornell mentioned, just the common things, watch your grammar, watch your spelling, be professional, and make it clear how you've grown over time. Those are all really great tips on resumes, tips that I think we've covered throughout the many episodes we've recorded at Touch MBA. But I also just wanted to highlight that, your resume is the framework through which adcoms can kind of understand your profile. And I think that's a really good metaphor. Again, remember that your resume is not a job resume, right? That's very different than an MBA resume. Keep that in mind and go back to our 7 Deadly Sins resume episode if you haven't listened to that one already. Question number 5, what do adcoms want to see in essays? Duke said that the essay is the best place to tell your story. It's the best place to offer what about the school connects with you and why do you want to be a part of that community and why do you want to pursue that experience. Duke said to make sure that you answer the question, don't cut and paste essays, and be careful with your language. In other words, don't say the wrong school. All right, guys? So if you're applying to Duke, don't mention the reason I really want to go to Ross or the reason I really want to go to Wharton is this seems so elementary, like first grade stuff, But the fact that a school like Duke Fuqua, their admissions officer is mentioning this, using precious airtime to mention this, is they must see this a lot, guys. Okay, so I don't care if it's like last minute applications for you guys. Use the freaking spell checker. Okay, use the find and replace function, and make sure you're not mentioning other schools in these essays. I know most of you won't do that, but I couldn't believe that they're still bringing this up in 2017, right? Let's see what else. So NYU and Yale had some really good advice here that I haven't mentioned on the show. There's this problem in essays that you're trying to tell your story, and sometimes you're trying to do that so hard that you don't answer the actual essay question, right? What these two schools recommended was cover the topic of your essay and have a friend read it. Have a friend read your essay and then ask your friend, what was the topic of this essay, right? What was the question that you think I was supposed to answer? And I thought that was a really simple but good tip. So I hope many of you do that. I think that's really smart. All right, let's get to number 6. The optional essay. Should it be used? Haas said to use the optional essay if you have a long employment gap or poor grades or anything that would give the admissions pause, then you should use the optional essay, and that even bullets are fine. Haas also mentioned don't repurpose other essays for the optional essay. Ross then chimed in and said, it's actually fine to not submit the optional essay. And then Cornell said, if you have a question about the application and you're not sure whether to use the optional essay or not, just reach out to the admissions team and ask them. Cornell also mentioned that they don't count exact words on your essays. So if you're at 301 words or 201 words, whatever it is, they're not going to count exact words. But the admissions officer did mention that they do have experience reading thousands of essays, so they know when an essay is long. So stay within those word counts. I want to make my own commentary here. When Ross said that it's fine to not submit optional essays, and they kind of all chuckled, I think this is a very important point, is that yes, admissions teams from business schools are here to market their programs. They're here to answer applicant questions, and they want to support the applicants throughout that journey and give them the best information possible to make, a huge investment decision, right? I don't doubt that for 1 second for all the top business schools. Now, the difference is you don't want to make admissions officers work more than they have to, especially because they're the ones evaluating you in the end, right? So yes, come with good questions, be enthusiastic and be prepared and ask them questions you really need help on that you couldn't find elsewhere, but don't treat them like low-level customer service type people that you could just throw, any question you have at them and then they're going to come back at you. So don't make them feel like working with you is a chore, okay? Key insight, I know many of you know this already, but it bears repeating. So let's move on to question 7, letter of recommendations. What are business schools looking for? Ross said that your recommenders should know you well and that Ross prefers current and former supervisors. That's better than a CEO of the company or even school alumni if they know you better. Ross also mentioned give your recommenders enough time to prepare to write a positive recommendation and find someone who's willing to put in the time to help you out and to recommend you. Darden mentioned that they prefer work recommendations over academic recommendations. Yale mentioned that, again, they prefer work supervisors like Darden, and that applicants coming from family businesses shouldn't get letters from relatives. So if you're in that situation and mom and dad is your boss, find someone else to give you a recommendation, right? Approach clients or other people who can comment on your work positively. Darden mentioned that when you're approaching your recommender, that you should ask them for permission to remind them of deadlines. And I'm going to step aside here and say, I think that's a really good idea. If you approach your recommender and you say, these are the deadlines for my application, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask your permission to remind you of those deadlines a month before or 2 months before, whatever it is. I think that's a really smart approach. You're asking your boss to go out of his or her way to recommend you. That's a lot of trouble, right, for them. But if you ask ahead of time to remind them of deadlines, then it won't feel like you're nagging them, right? Because you've already established this expectation. So I thought that was a really good tip. Johnson mentioned to pick recommenders who know you well and who can explain your defining moments and impact made. And I thought, again, that was a really good way of putting it. Who knows your defining moments? Might be a good way to think of your best recommenders. Question number 8, what tips do you have for interviews? Duke said, be aware of who is conducting the interview, whether it's an alumni, an admissions officer, or a student. In the case of Duke, most of their interviews are blind interviews so that their alumni interviewers just have the applicant's resume. This admissions officer suggested that applicants, really use the interviews to bring their resume to life and to tell their story. Depending on who's interviewing you, whether it's an alumni or a student or admissions officer, they're going to have a different perspective. So student interviewers would want to know why you'd be a great addition to the community. She gave this tip to have good questions ready for your interviewer, because she said many times their student interviewers will say, come back to the admissions office and say, this applicant just didn't have any questions for me. They didn't have anything to ask me, or they asked me very simple questions. So I think that's good advice there from Duke, is to ask good questions. That's just as important as answering the questions correctly. Virginia mentioned to get ready to answer the typical questions like why this school, why MBA, why you went from job to job. And she mentioned to not be mechanical in your answers. Don't be over-rehearsed. Ross said, make sure you're familiar with what's on your resume. The admissions officer shared this example that one applicant said she spoke 7 languages. So the interviewer asked this applicant to say one sentence in all the 7 languages, and the applicant kind of fumbled around with that. So know everything in your resume could be brought up in the interview. Haas mentioned to be on time and to dress professionally. Johnson said, the goal of the interview for you as an applicant is to get the interviewer on your side to fight for you on your behalf, to basically become your advocate. So that's really about connecting with that interviewer and showing your personality in the interview as well. Question number 9, how do you show interest in programs? Ross said, connect with as many students and alumni as possible through blogs, webinars, etc. To be professional in your outreach and don't overdo it. I already mentioned this. Take advantage of admissions staff to better understand schools, but know that admissions are also evaluating you all the time, and you want to be someone rewarding to deal with when you're an applicant. Make sure you leave goodwill in every interaction with the school. All right, question 10. Now it turned to audience questions. The first question was, what if your recommender is not a native English speaker? So that's a big problem, for example, in Vietnam. So Haas mentioned you could have your recommendation letters officially translated. Again, I'll recommend a service in the show notes for you guys. Question 11, what are some common myths and facts about the MBA application process? Duke answered that many applicants create a one-size-fits-all essays for every school. Here, this is my own commentary. I think you can use similar stories across your applications. You want to tell your best stories, but make sure those stories really address the questions asked. Sometimes you can have a great story that shows your leadership, and that same story could be used to show, for example, dealing with a difficult team member. So sometimes stories can overlap, but I think the key thing is to really make sure you're answering the questions that the schools are asking, so they don't think, oh gosh, this applicant's like really forcing this essay she's already written into this one, right? You don't want them to think that. Yale mentioned that candidates often project what they think schools want to hear, but that's really obvious. And Yale really wants to know who you really are. And again, this is a tough question we've tried to tackle here on the podcast. If you're having difficulty with that, in other words, marketing yourself, but not sounding like a copy of a school's webpage, go listen to my interview with Bruce Delmonico. He's the admissions director at Yale. That's episode 75. Okay, Haas mentioned applicants often think that because of the reputation of the school, they have to be that type of applicant. So For Haas, that would be, being involved in tech or social impact. For NYU Stern, that would probably be finance. The answer is no, you don't have to be interested in those things to be a part of those schools. In recent years, NYU Stern has launched a tech MBA, a one-year tech MBA. They've also launched a one-year fashion and luxury MBA. And they have specializations in fintech and analytics. And the admissions officer made it very clear that the biggest recruiter to NYU Stern last year was Amazon, not a bank. If any of you guys need help with this, I would highly recommend episode 69, where I interview Lee Da-Ming, who graduated from Northwestern Kellogg, and he talks about how to fit into a school yet also stand out. And a lot of that has to do with the school's own reputation, right? So go check out that episode. And then Virginia Darden mentioned that averages are just averages. Whether that's the average GPA or the average GMAT score, know that, if you're slightly below those averages, that there's also a lot of people that were also slightly below those averages. In other words, don't be discouraged from applying. All right, question 12. Does visiting school campuses increase your chances of getting in? Duke said it makes absolutely no difference. It's just that campus visits give you a firsthand experience to speak to in your application. I think this is a really good point. It doesn't make a difference to these schools, whether you visit the school campus. It's not like they have a checklist and they're gonna check you if you actually visited school, but it's just a way for you to talk more authoritatively and more convincingly about why a school would be a good fit for you. I know not all of you will be able to do this. So the closest thing you can do after visiting a campus is to talk to students and talk to alumni, really absorb their experience and how they talk about their experience. Because it's just easier in an interview to speak convincingly once you've been to a place, whether you're interviewing me about living in Vietnam or living in Singapore or visiting, the Utah national parks that I mentioned at the beginning of the show. I've been there. I've experienced it. So I can really just talk more fluently about the school. So if you can visit campuses, I would strongly encourage you to do so. But I know for many of you, that's not a possibility. Well, then talk to as many students as you can. Question 13. How do schools view multiple GMAT scores, and how do schools view different sections of the GMAT? Virginia mentioned that they look at your scores. They look at all your scores. So if they have three of your GMAT scores, they're going to look at what your scores were by section, and that Virginia is also looking for quant skills not only in these tests but in your transcript and work experience. And then Haas mentioned that they're really looking for reasons to admit you as an applicant. They're not looking for reasons to strike you down. So I think that was a really good way to put it. I think that many of you have come to Touch MBA and said, which GMAT score should I use? The 710 with a lower quant score, or the 690 with a higher quant score. And I think that schools will be able to see your GMAT scores and your GMAT score breakdowns, right? So if you did really well in quant the second time around, despite your lower GMAT score, I think that's what they're going to look at. Question 14, how are the IR and AWA sections evaluated? Virginia said that they're still figuring out IR and that the AWA is looked at because it's seen basically as a writing sample. Check out episode 106, which is the GMAT episode, to see how 3 top schools interpret the IR and the AWA score. We really go into detail on that. Question 15. What if you see conflicting evidence and data points for quant scores? Schools didn't really give a direct answer here, but Duke said what they want to see is a growth in progression and skill set through work experience, courses, and that if there is something really conflicting that might be confusing, you might want to mention this in your optional essay. So again, I think schools want to see trends. So if there's conflicting evidence and data points, let's say that you scored really poorly in an economics class and while you're an undergrad, well, you can really make that up by scoring well in the quant section of your GMAT because that's more recent. So they're looking again for trends. And I wanted to also give you guys my recommended resources for showing quant ability because that was clearly a theme of this presentation. I would recommend MBA Math. You can just Google it. I believe it's mbamath.com. This was started by a former business school professor, and a number of the top business schools like Johnson, Tuck, Fuqua all actually require students to take this MBA math. You can go in there, and I believe this 1-year subscription is $150, but there's 24 lessons on 5 subjects, and their tagline on the website is 20 to 40 hours. It will take to finish these 24 lessons, and you can actually send transcripts to schools. So I think this is, a good way to show your quant skills is MBA math. I mean, if schools are already using this software and these courses to teach their current students, then if you can show that you're scoring well in, say, statistics, even though you don't have a statistics background, I think that's good evidence of your quant skills, right? So I would recommend mbamath.com. There's also, for example, Wharton's Business Foundations specialization on Coursera. And there's like HBX's Core Credential of Readiness, which I believe costs about $2,000 that you can take online. But I think in terms of bang for the buck, I would go for MBA Math. All right, so that's just my recommendation. Let's move on to question 16. What about international experience? Virginia said, yes, make sure you get that into your resume. So my own commentary on this is one of the ways we actually evaluate your profile, right? When you submit to us at touchmba.com, we're looking for evidence of international experience. Now, many applicants confuse this as, I've only worked in the US for 5 years. I don't have any international experience. Well, that's not true. Or I've only worked in India, or I've only worked in Vietnam, right? For 5 years. And many times as a younger person in the workforce, you don't have these opportunities to say, work and live in another country. That's okay. What you need to do is show that you have experience, say, working with international companies or international partners or international colleagues, right? There's many ways to show that you have international experience, and you want to highlight those things. For those of you younger applicants, just getting started thinking about business school, I think that's something you should really think about, especially if you're coming from a developing country. Try to pursue assignments and projects where you'll be able to work internationally, because that's going to really help you when you apply to business school. These cohorts now at these top business schools are so international. So if you can show evidence that you've worked in multicultural teams, you've worked with very diverse people, that's what admissions officers are looking for. Okay, I'm off my soapbox, but yeah, seek out those international opportunities, guys. Question 17, interviews. Is there any difference between how adcom interviews and student interviews are evaluated? Great question. And there's not. Duke said that they actually prefer students to interview applicants and prefer alumni to interview applicants because they get a different perspective. Admissions officer is going to have one way of looking at a candidate. Students and alumni are going to have different ways of looking at candidates. So I think schools that use student interviewers or alumni interviewers appreciate that diverse perspective. And again, just a reminder that if you're preparing for interviews, to take that into account. Know that, for example, an admissions officer is most likely to have a full file, quote unquote, on you, right? Than a student or alumni interviewer who will most likely be interviewing you blind. So make sure you inquire ahead of time, know who your interviewer is, know roughly how much information they will have about you, and know that student interviewers will want to know, do I want this person in my class? That's probably the first question they're going to be asking. And an alumni interviewer will probably be asking, well, would I want this person as part of my network, right? Approach the interview from those perspectives. Question 18, is the length of a recommendation important? And Virginia answered, the key question to ask is, has the recommender worked with you long enough to give you a worthwhile recommendation? I think that's a good answer. Question 19, what is the most stressful part of the MBA? Cornell mentioned that the most stressful part is getting back into school mode and studying and working in group settings, and also applicants who don't have that quant background getting up to speed. So again, MBA math, guys, they're not paying me for this recommendation. I just think it's a good way to show schools more evidence of your quant skills and get a sneak peek of what MBA classes are going to be like, right? Virginia mentioned that time management is the most stressful part of the MBA. With everything going on, studies, internships, looking for jobs, social life, that's the hardest part. Okay, question number 20. What's the most rewarding part of the MBA? Virginia mentioned it's the friendships you make. Ross mentioned it's getting the job you want. Ross also made a comment here that in terms of alumni networks, that what you really want from an alumni network is the ability to get a response. It's not necessarily the number of alumni. And I think this is a really important point. And I was thinking of maybe even doing a short podcast on this. I mean, just talking about networking, networking strategies, and what makes a really good network. And done a bit of thinking on this for the past week. And I think that the responsiveness of your network, the ability of you to ask a question, about an industry or about a job or about a trend that you don't know about, and your ability to get an answer within, say, a day or two, that means you have a great network and a diverse network, network with breadth, right? I think that's what we all really need to strive for in the future, is this responsive network. And that's why I think one of the most underrated rankings is the alumni ranking that The Economist has for schools. And schools like Dartmouth, Tuck always rank really high for alumni effectiveness. And I think that's a lot of that is about getting an immediate response. If you reach out to alumni, are they going to respond to you, and are they going to respond to you quickly? So I think that's such an important question, not just for business school, but for your own personal and professional networks. All right, question 21, the last question. It's my own question. What are your key takeaways, Darren, from this session? And I think my key takeaways from this presentation offered by these great schools are really looking for quant proficiency. That was a big theme of the session. So, make sure you're giving them plenty of evidence of that, whether that's what you've studied as an undergrad and your performance in certain classes, whether that's your GMAT score, especially on that quant section, or whether that's extracurricular activities you've done like MBA math, or online or offline courses you've taken, or maybe you've done a lot of quant work in your job. Make sure you highlight those things. I think schools are really conscious about that these days. Second takeaway, use that resume to structure how schools look at you. So we talked about framing in one of our past episodes, and the resume is really your key way to frame your candidacy. One page is such an easy and quick way for an admissions officer to get a grip of what you're about. So make sure you really use that opportunity to put your profile in a certain light. Whether that's emphasizing certain work accomplishments or certain education or certain extracurricular passions you have. Make sure you really spend a lot of time on that resume, because that's the main keyhole through which schools are viewing you to start. Okay, and that often can influence their perception of you throughout the whole process. Okay, third takeaway, the number of conversations you have with students and alumni from your target schools. This is my theory. I think it has a direct correlation with your chances of getting in. Now, of course, if you have a 500 GMAT score, talking to 100 students probably won't help your chances at the world's top 10 schools, right? So you got to put yourself in the running, of course, with your hard stats. But in terms of getting through the door, I just think that the more conversations you have with students and alumni, the more you'll be able to see how the school fits you, the more you'll be able to refine your own pitch to these schools. So please, guys, don't wait till the last minute to do that. And are we on takeaway 4 or 5? I can't remember. Second to last one is, don't make admissions officers work harder than they need to. Always leave goodwill in the interaction and listen to their instructions in the application, right? If they say 2 recommendations, don't send 3. If you don't need to write that optional essay, don't write it, right? That's just an extra essay for that admissions officer to read. Imagine if you had to read, dozens and dozens of applications during the day, right? You'd probably get annoyed if someone submitted a 4-page resume when you're asking for a 1-page resume, right, guys? So just follow instructions and don't make the gatekeeper work harder than they need to. And finally, the last takeaway is again, regarding the essays, stay on topic. And a great way to do this is to not tell your friend what the essay topic is. Give your friend the essay, have her read it, have him read it, and then ask him, what do you think the question was for this essay? I think that's such a good tip. Let's end it there. There you have it, guys. 21 application questions answered. I hope you found it helpful, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.